Let's show it. Yeah, there we go.
You're live.
Thank you. Good morning. So it's September 30th. This is the meeting of the Information Technology Oversight Committee. As the Ledge Council mentioned, we have, I think it was ambitious agenda today. What we have first up is it's described as a report and discussion of the committees of what we see as jurisdiction over what Joint Information Technology Oversight Committee could be looking at. We have Senators Perchlik and Harrison here from Appropriations and Institutions, and Representatives Harrison and James from Appropriations and Energy and Digital Infrastructure. And Senator Perchlik, if you want to come up, do you want to join us at the table? Or you can stay there, however you want to present it. You can just sit at the table, because I'm kind of hoping this might be a bit of a discussion, but I know that some of you folks might have, a presentation and thank you for the overview of your committee. I think that's very helpful for us to see what your committee had, so we can look at it. So what I was seeing this discussion as being something along the lines of, we'll talk to the committees of jurisdiction, see how the chairs and Rep. Harrison see the interaction with our committee. And the way I want some of the discussion to go is to look at sort of the both extremes of what it could be. Whereas Jitoc is something that's completely separate from committees of jurisdiction, and we do our own thing in terms of oversight, versus the other extreme where, and this is just my experience with joint justice and what I understand the joint transportation does as well, is that those are made up of the committees of jurisdiction, and it seems to be more of a continuation during the off session than a separate committee. So I suppose I'll just go in order and start with, as we have it on our agenda, we'll start with Senator Perchlik. If you wanted to have a presentation on your thoughts on that, or really anything else about your committee and what Jitoc's role could be.
Yeah, thank you. My thoughts of it from appropriations was that we do need another committee looking at the oversight of these expenditures. They're some of the largest expenditures the state makes. The appropriations committee, especially in the Senate, doesn't have the time to dig into these appropriations. It's hard for us to dig into some of the normal appropriations, quote unquote normal ones. But when we have these very large or technology information systems, we just basically have to trust the administration and the agency of digital services of what they're saying. And if somebody, or unless somebody comes up, like an auditor has done a report or something like that. On other parts of state government that come before us with their budget requests, if there's an issue, we go to the committees of jurisdiction. So if there's big healthcare expenditures, we say like, well, let's go talk to the healthcare committee and see what testimony have they taken. We have a chair on our committee, but if that chair wasn't there, we would totally rely on that committee of jurisdiction. But it seems like with this, the items that are under the jurisdiction of ADS, there isn't a committee that's doing that deep dive work or enough of it. And it seems like part of what I think is needed, that the committees during the legislative session, seems more clear on what their jurisdiction is and what they're doing. Or maybe I just need to learn more about it, but it seems like that is not yet clear. I mean, it's still kind of a relatively new thing that we have technology committees or committees that have that in their realm of responsibility. And it hasn't really been clear of the delineation of what that means, at least in my mind, and what they're covering. I think having committees during the regular session that are focusing on the large expenditure technology programs of the state would be helpful. And then to advise the appropriations committee on those, like, okay, we spent some time on this, here's our take on it, here's some issues, here's what we think on those. I haven't heard the argument of why you would need a separate joint information technology oversight committee than the committees. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea, I just haven't heard why you would do that. Maybe it's a good idea. I'm looking at it like Jitoc, the joint transportation oversight committee, where it really is the two committees during the legislative session doing that oversight of the transportation budget. But in the off season, or if there's something specific like that, you need that combined work, then that's what we use that committee for. I think some years they don't meet, some years they meet several times during the summer. I think sometimes they have met near the end of the session or something like that to help, but it seems like that's a good model. It's worked well. I don't know about the justice.
And we'd spoken briefly before this meeting, and this is just my ignorance on the transportation committee. What is that made up of? Is it, specifically made up of, transportation chair, appropriations, representative?
I think it's just that. It's
Okay.
Chair of transportation, chair of appropriations, and then that's, I think maybe two members from transportation. I don't know if Wendy or Senator Harrison knows, but it's similar to this, 3 and 3. I don't know if it's always the vice chair of transportation or if it's just another member from transportation. That's what it's been the years that I've been involved.
And that one has 6 members.
Yeah.
Joint Justice has 10 members. It's big.
Yeah. Those are the basic things that I was thinking of about it. There's this other question about what is information technology, which I don't know if I brought up to you on the phone. I don't know if you've looked at the statutory definition, but when I had to look this up for another kind of similar question, I thought the definition was so broad it could mean everything. So if it could mean every cell phone call and every email that you send. So it's way too broad if you're using the legislative definition. And for procurement purposes, state that needs to be defined, I think, differently as far and what kind of level of oversight is given those things, those information technology systems or activities. And then from there, that would help on procurements, but it would also help on defining what the role of a committee like this would be.
I don't think did we look at that specifically, Rick or Maria, the definition? Where is it defined in at least what you were just mentioning?
I printed it out, but I forgot to put the citation on here.
We can find.
Yeah. But here, let me read it real quick.
Yes.
Information technology activities means the creation, collection, processing, storage, management, transmission, or conversion of electronic data, documents, or records, and the design, construction, purchase, installation, maintenance, or operation of systems, including hardware, software, and services that perform or are contracted to perform these activities. So to me, that seems like that is actually anything where there's any kind of electronic data, which could be every email, every phone call.
The entirety of
If
government.
you turn on a computer, you're doing an information technology. So, yeah, everything that we do every day. So that's very broad. And it's referenced a couple times. I came across it around. There's the ADS is to create an information technology procurement policy about information technology activities. But it's so broad, and if you read the policy, I found it so broad that it's difficult to know when ADS is involved and not.
Thanks. And anyone from the committee have any questions or comments at this point with Senator Perchuk?
No, we just want to thank him for making the big trip.
Yeah. No, from all the way across the street.
Thank you. But stick around. Don't start the long trek back. So Senator Harrison, how about from your perspective?
Sure. And I really appreciate what Senator Perchlik said. And I want to comment on a couple of those comments because that is a good place to start because it's the overall purpose not just of this committee of Jitoc, but of IT. And I think IT, it should be it is appropriately defined broadly, because it's the environment and the environment that we work in. So you could see it as every single email, or you can see it as the email system. And similar to the State House, right? Before IT, we had the State House, and so there's all sorts of decisions that need to be made regarding our ability to function as a legislature. And so we make the same um, systems decisions now to help us perform well as a legislature and and the state generally, right? So having secure email is critical, and that's actually something I didn't have on my list. But someone recently had a .gov email from a legislator used a .gov email address, and that is much more protected than what we use currently. So that's a detail, but that should hopefully be on someone's list, if not on this committee's list. The way that I see this committee right now is kind of a hybrid between the oversight, the money oversight committees, but because the money oversight committees need to exist when we're not in session so that they can handle things that come up. And just last week or the week before, transportation committee uh, was necessary. And I think that doesn't happen every time. I think this committee, JITOC, needs to exist whether or not there are emergencies, because there's just so much to do. And I would very much appreciate the um, I'm presuming that JITOC would be able to get real down in the weeds on things, because these are very uh, just complicated systems. And I would hope that JITOC could be a resource for the committees of jurisdiction. And now institutions is just recently the committee of jurisdiction in the Senate. We didn't have that specified previously. Last year, we focused on external, impacts to state residents, notably kids code was that. This year, I intend to focus, and we talked about this last year, more on internal systems, um, and hopefully do data privacy as well. But it's a lot. So my specific comments that I prepared for this meeting have to do with internal um, aspects the of our IT systems. And if it's not ADS, um, well, I'm presuming that ADS would be part of these conversations. I mean they have to be. And if folks are doing if folks have systems, if departments have systems outside of ADS, I think JTalk should know that and document that. And presumably ADS would help you be able to do that. So, would you like me to continue on my um, the more specific things that I would like this committee to look at?
Yes, absolutely. I was just going to ask one thing is if there's some sort of output you'd want from your committee, I guess, and that could be,
Sure.
bill suggestions, reports, and that kind of thing. But yeah,
Right. Well,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
definitely. So overall, I want this committee to feel comfortable recommending something that I or no one suggested. If you in your work find things that you think need to be addressed, please let me know. Let the other folks know. I presume that other folks would want to know also. But specifically, and like for example, AI isn't on my list because I think you're going to be looking at that. Um, but specifically, what I want to bring up are the subscription-based information technology arrangements. Basically, where we have a long-term contract with a company rather than owning the software. I want to make sure that the cost of that software or services are clear, both to the legislature, to the administration, and to the public. I'd really like long-term financial projections, and this may already be happening, but long-term financial projections of the overall cost, and uh, also what's really important to me is the cost allocation to the departments, because there have been situations where departments, um, we had a situation where there was a department that wanted to decrease a fee because the system wasn't clear. It wasn't clear to them that there was a cost to the new system, but there's always a cost to the new system. So it's just very important that departments understand those costs and uh, include them in their budgets, and especially when we're looking at revenue issues, which we will probably always be looking at revenue issues, that we include that in those costs in the conversation. Um, there was an a system that I heard about last year, and it was either a very old system or a very new system or a potential, where the payment to the vendor was essentially Vermonters' data. And I want to make sure that I would prefer to not have those contracts at all, contracts like that. And I understand in the DMV there are certain things that we need to provide to the insurance companies. So if there's a reason to have it, obviously a legal reason that we have to, we would do it. But I think that that method of payment should not be used, and that's obviously a policy decision. I don't know if that would rise to a bill, or if we would need to change uh, statute to make that happen. But I think we should certainly have a conversation about it at the legislative level. I think it's really important that we have expectations on how we're going to pay for services. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. So the next thing is a priority of needs, because we have a lot of needs. Security should be number one, I believe, and I believe it is. ADS is highest security. But I'd like to have a conversation on a high level about the how we measure existing systems and future systems. So security, to me, security, efficacy, and cost. Um, it's there are pressures to keep costs low, but I want to, my priority is security first, efficacy, and then cost. So I'd like to have a discussion with that. I don't assume that my priorities are everyone's priorities, but we need to have that conversation. And when we look at cost, there's all these costs that aren't quantified and aren't necessarily dollar costs, but the public. We serve the public. We need to make sure that the impacts to the public, um, negative and positive, are part of our evaluation of systems. Okay. And so the next thing is about procurement, and I've I'm aware of two software companies that are nonprofit and mission-based companies. And one was I found out about when I was a talent manager, and their price was so low. I inherited the contract from the previous person, and the cost of this that this software company, they were helping us with wastewater um, financial projections. Um, I initially thought that they wouldn't be good because their price was so low, but it turns out they were great. So sometimes a low cost that looks suspicious at the beginning isn't necessarily a bad thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? Is that okay? So I'd like to find an a way to prioritize uh, um, in the procurement system um, these mission-based, employee-owned co-ops, especially Vermont-based businesses, because something that's happening in the data world, as you all know, I'm sure, is consolidation, and the consolidation is less likely in co-ops and employee-owned businesses. Obviously, they need to be quality businesses, but I want to find a way to have that aspect included in the procurement process.
And Senator Harrison, or actually everybody bouncing off of that, do we know if there's any sort of preferences for different vendors that are in procurement policies? Whether it's
Probably, but I
local.
don't know. I haven't delved into that.
Yeah, okay, so that's a question to find out.
Um, and then the auditor had recommendations from last year, and we did uh, have a bill to implement part of them, but the second part is waiting for this coming year, and the agency may have a a, a different way of addressing the issues, but that's the last thing on my list.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any, Senator Burchell?
I just remembered who the other members of Jitoc, the Joint Transportation were. It's the other money chairs. So
Okay.
it's Ways and Means and Finance.
Okay.
Chairs, third members.
All right, and I'm just going through the list. This isn't in order of preference. Which I don't know if that's going to insult one or the other. Representative Harris,
No worries.
you are next on the list.
Yeah, good morning. A lot of good comments have been made. I probably, my message is really simple. I mean, you asked about how can Jitoc intertwine with the various committees. On appropriations, one of my budget areas is ADS. So sometimes I'm asked to, help with a priority. And from my standpoint, and probably the Senate would agree, we really need the policy committee, in this case, Kath James's committee, to look at the projects which they've been doing this year and give us a recommendation. And in some cases, with limited funds, we have to pick and choose. Coming out of the pandemic, when we had a lot of federal money coming our way and we were trying to play catch up on a lot of the IT projects, that was invaluable in terms of, because we couldn't do everything. And going forward, we're not going to be able to do everything, and we're going to have to start with a priority. So that's when we're in session. We need very much so for the policy committees to give us recommendations going forward. The second thing in terms of Jitoc specifically is when we start projects, oftentimes there are check-in periods. And I, for one, am certainly happy to give that authority to Jitoc for checkoff. For example, an independent review comes in, it may not come in when we're in session, or appropriations may not have time. The policy committee may or may not have time. I'm certainly happy to give Jitoc and want to use Jitoc to say, yes, we did. We looked at the independent review. Things are on schedule. Everything's a go. We've already appropriated the money. But before we actually spend it and say the project's going forward, having Jitoc kind of look at that, and probably in consultation with Lisa from our IT consultant, who has a unique way of actually understanding some of this stuff, would be very, very helpful going forward. So I, for one, would love to see Jitoc have more of that authority, or saying yes to certain triggers going forward. So that's for where I'm coming at it.
Great. Does anyone have any questions for Harrison? And I do, I know last year Jitoc had final approval of one project. This year that did not happen. Were there any projects that were contemplated to kick to Jitoc this past session, if anyone might be aware?
Yeah, good question. I'm not aware. I mean, I think, a lot of times the projects are built into individual budgets as one time, even though they go through ADS. One that comes to mind offhand, I think there was, and Kath, you can clarify that, but I think there was 1.8 million in the liquor and lottery budget for their business to business system, where the agents can actually order their liquor and whatnot through the online system. And I don't remember. Evidently, we didn't put a trigger in, but that could have been one that we said, yes, put a trigger in, make sure that it's given blessings by Jitoc when that independent review is done.
Great. Thank you. And Representative James.
Thanks. To respond to Jim's question, which I don't know the answer to, or to present my testimony?
Either or both.
Huh?
The floor is yours.
Yes, and.
However.
Okay. I don't know the answer to Representative Harrison's question. Does anybody? Doesn't ring a bell.
But we'll move on to you on the agenda too, Kath.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. So a couple things. So I think everybody here knows that we were a newly reconstituted committee this past session. So the House had previously had an Energy and Technology Committee that took a one biennium break and came back. So it really was actually a chance for us to kind of make sure that we had clarity on our role and what our policy areas were and what our jurisdiction was. And I thought I felt comfortable with how we defined it. So just to share that with everybody here, we obviously do energy policy, but on the digital infrastructure side, on the House, our committee is looking at broadband. We're looking at telecoms. And then in terms of IT, we were very focused on state of Vermont IT systems. Not IT everything, not IT writ large, not all IT everywhere all the time, but state of Vermont IT systems. And that was really helpful to us, I think, having that clarity from the beginning in terms of the testimony we took and the work we did. So on the House side anyway, our committee is doing broadband, telecoms, and state of Vermont IT. In addition, I just want to add that we have clarity, I think, in terms of committee jurisdiction on the House side, which is that we are looking at state IT, state AI, state cybersecurity. So everything we do is in the context of state government. Broader consumer protection issues like data privacy fall to our House Commerce Committee, and that is not us. So anyway, just wanted to set the table with, I feel like on the House side we know what we're focused on, and thank God that was very helpful, because that in and of itself is more than enough. So that's our committee jurisdiction. What we did on the House side in terms of, we did some broadband and telecoms work, but on the state of Vermont IT side, we did a lot, I think. One was that we tried to take systematic testimony to understand our state IT systems. And I did turn in a little piece of written testimony. I flipped through all of our agendas yesterday from the beginning of the session to the end. And I listed for Jitoc members every time that we took testimony on the topic of state IT. So you can just see that in February, we heard from the auditor about the auditor's report, and we started just working through key programs or agencies that had IT that felt the most relevant to us. So we learned about the Department of Motor Vehicles. We obviously did DCF. We did corrections. We learned about our legislative IT system. We learned about the judiciary IT system. We did the Department of Labor, Secretary of State, Agency of Education. And then we took some really interesting testimony in kind of a series of hearings on state of Vermont IT funding. How do we pay for our state IT ongoing maintenance, but mostly for our big upgrades, our big IT modernization projects? JFO did an amazing amount of work for us on that and presented some great testimony to us that I did link in here. And we took some testimony on how other states fund and pay for their their big upgrades. And the idea here was, one, to understand how it works. It's complicated. I'm not sure I have still a sophisticated grasp on it. But to try to understand, maybe as a legislature, how we over time could be a little bit more proactive about how we pay for these big upgrades. I think the pattern in the past, anyway, has been that we get a budget request for $40 million because VDOL needs a huge upgrade, and we need to find a way to pay for that. And so trying to work our way over time to, one, understanding how it works now, which again I thought was not as easy as I'd hoped, but also to see if there is a need, if there even is a need, to change the way we pay for these projects, maybe save for these projects ahead of time. So we did a lot of work on that. Also, the IT modernization oversight. We felt that this was a really, really important role that our committee plays in trying to make sure that we're understanding the big modernization projects that state government is undertaking, often with the leadership and support of ADS. I think folks know, and I assume she's in the room, although I can't see, that JFO has an amazing consultant, Lisa Govan, who also is providing some legislative oversight through the JFO office on how these projects are going. So when we're spending 10, 20, $40 million or more to upgrade a state IT system, how is that work progressing? Is it on time? Is it on budget? Are we spending our money properly? Is it delivering the results it should be delivering for Vermonters when we're done? So we spent a lot of time on oversight, and the bill we passed, I think, is a really important first step. H458, Act 48, really was the first step toward making sure that we as legislators and the Vermont public have the information we need to make sure that these big ticket projects are working as we had planned. And so I think getting that bill across the finish line was important, and I think our ongoing oversight work is really important, and I think the work that JFO and Lisa Govin is doing is also really important. And then we did start to take testimony across the board on state of Vermont data sales and sharing, which Senator Harrison was talking about. We took some testimony. We tried to put some information about this into our bill, H458. We weren't successful in getting a broad report back into our bill, but we did get a lot of cooperation from the Secretary of State. So I think continuing to try to wrap our arms around the extent to which Vermonters' data is shared or sold, how it's shared, and whether it's sold, I think will be some important work for the next biennium or the next session. So to wrap it all up, that's the role of our committee. And I just want to reiterate that IT funding and IT modernization oversight from our committees is really important. We need to stay on top of this. I think it's the most important work our committees could be doing. And that, I guess that brings me to the role of Jitoc. I think that's where Jitoc could be really useful, because I don't think this is dip in, dip out work. I think this is year-round work. And so I would like to make sure that our standing committees and our money committees and Jitoc are structured in such a way that we're providing regular year-round oversight of our state IT systems and the work that we're doing to upgrade them and the money that we're spending to do that. I think that's it for me.
Great. Thank you, Representative James. And this, when we had talked during our first meeting, the interaction between this committee and the committees of jurisdiction was kind of universally the thing that we wanted to have a conversation about. So I guess now's our time to have that conversation. Does anyone on the committee have any further thoughts on what we've just heard, or is it something we'll revisit later on?
I will say that the most helpful thing I've heard in terms of thinking about all of this was just the, of course, analogy to joint transportation and the other. And so the missing link has been, I think, a lot in the Senate. So that seems to be shifting. So. And that's not how this committee started. It kind of started as a grab bag. Lots of fun things.
And that's what it seemed like. There, and the folks that have been here, was there a committee of jurisdiction when this committee started?
I don't think that energy and technology was, I think it came into place the same year as Jitoc. Randy
Senator
was
Brock.
also been on.
Still muted, Randy.
My concept, from what I recall when Jitoc was formed in the first place, is it was a parallel to what was going on in Congress in some ways, as well as elsewhere in state government, of having oversight committees with areas of specialization. And the concept of an oversight committee was twofold. One, oversight, in other words, up above looking down. And then it was a committee that was providing sight, not action. In other words, it was not interfering. One of the concerns in particular was not to create a committee that interfered with what the committees of jurisdiction were doing, that it may provide oversight, and it might provide a view, it might provide recommendations. If it was parallel to some extent on what we saw as congressional oversight committees. And generally, the congressional oversight committees looked at things from a standpoint of compliance with existing laws and regulations. Was the work being done in accordance with existing laws and regulations? Was it being done in a cost-effective manner? In other words, were the public funds being used appropriately? And then lastly, it provided a look on waste, fraud, the integrity of the operation, and whether or not it was operating effectively and efficiently. And it was those areas of focus. And one of the real concerns was to make sure that it was an oversight committee, but not a committee that interfered with the operations of the committees of jurisdiction. We moved on in subsequent years, in some cases, to have specific tasks to look, for example, at a system that was being developed, and in some cases to get into a second level of approval for the release of funds. And that was an area in which I was not always entirely comfortable, but I understood the reasons why. I don't know if that background is of help to the committee in just providing a kind of a view of some of the things that we did.
Thank you, Senator Brock. It's definitely helped for me, seeing how it started, what the idea was, and sort of the conversation we're having now. Any other thoughts?
Well, the other thought that I would add in too is the high level look. One of the issues that we have sometimes a tendency to do is to delve into great detail about specific projects or subject areas. That potentially has the effect of providing additional information to committees of jurisdiction because they could be focused work, particularly during the off session over a period of time on the one hand. On the other hand, it can be interference with what the committees of jurisdiction are doing. And we need to obviously hear from them, as we've heard today, about what would be of help to them and at the same time, what would not be.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is helpful. And I think what I was hearing is that there is some need for wanting or some desire to try to get some help with trying to handle how big of a beast IT is, whether it's like major multi-million dollar IT projects and whether it's the check-in. Like I heard, like check-ins would be helpful because you can't necessarily do those all the time, especially at the time that they might need to happen. Reviewing the independent reviews and reports that they might not get to. Then it sounds like it's to a certain extent like legislative recommendations and or budget recommendations to all the committees. Like it sounds from everybody I've heard from so far that people would appreciate some more help. And that makes sense because I feel like, working with a bunch of other states from around the country, we're like the only one that I know of so far that doesn't have a dedicated IT committee and or cybersecurity, AI, privacy committee. We're the only one that I've run into. So it makes sense that when we're trying to slam the jurisdiction into existing standing committees that are trying to deal with massive other topics like corrections, institutions, energy, those are massive things. It was great to hear that it sounds like expanded capacity is a role that we could play.
I think one of the things that also to take into account is this concept of oversight, particularly in terms of the way it's done on the federal government side. Oversight is often from a 50,000-foot level in order to see the entire field that you're looking at. One of the things I've noticed that Jitoc sometimes does is it winds up focusing on those particular things that individual members find either interesting or exciting or important, or the dollar values involved suggest that we should get involved in it. In my mind, we also, though, have to make sure on the original purpose of oversight that we're looking at the entire field, that we're trying to determine the things that perhaps ought to be looked at and ought to be prioritized that we might not necessarily see unless we are looking at the entire field. And we then wind up focusing on things that are of importance to particular members or for that matter, particular committees, and then we forget the rest. And we have to recognize that this is a huge field that does require that large vision, which the definition of oversight typically involves.
And anyone else? So, Rep. Riesler.
This is fascinating because I'm also, it seems like in the past, this committee has been so high level that it's or one-off in particular projects that it doesn't catch what seems like could be a critical aspect of oversight, which is being able to identify patterns, structures, things that are going well, things that are not going well, And I don't see how we could do that at certain aspects without digging into certain projects and multiple projects to see what kind of pattern emerges, whether that's people-based patterns or whether that's process-based patterns. And especially when we're trying to be proactive versus reactive when we're dealing with tens of millions of dollars.
There's a hand up there.
Yeah, there's a hand.
Senator Harrison.
I'll defer. I'll defer.
Okay.
Well, no, I'm sorry. Okay,
Go ahead, Senator Harrison.
just a quick question. I think this is a quick question. Um, it would be helpful to have a comprehensive gathering or statement of policy that exists in this field. Senator Perchlik had some the definitions, but I am not aware. I should be aware of the policies that already exist at the legislative level, policies that already exist for procurement, for how we charge, whatever exists. It would be helpful to have that.
Senator Woods.
So I have a question, probably for Ledge Council, but all Senate and House committees have critical and broad responsibilities. And giving a current example, right now, Senate Ed, we've obviously got a big education question in front of us with Act 73 and other related legislation. My question is that, so the Senate Ed Committee has asked President Pro Tem for authorization to have a committee meeting between session. And I'm curious what prevents a committee of jurisdiction to do some of the functions which Jitoc is currently tasked is doing. For the Senate and House committees to make the same type of request for a between session committee meeting. Is there anything to prevent that, or is that pro forma?
I don't think there's anything to prevent that. It's just the approval of the leadership to make sure that there's money available to pay for the, but so, yeah.
Okay.
You could authorize them or have a policy so that it's a little more clearly defined that they tell me, but it's always subject to the approval, make sure that the funding is available.
Thank you.
Great. So anything else from anybody that would have? Senator Person.
Thank you. I thought Rep. James' description of our committee was very helpful, and I think that's the key thing is what Senator Weeks just said is how you overlap or don't overlap with the committees of jurisdiction. And I think that will be the key, that you don't just become a grab bag. And as Senator Brock said, that you take on things that just are of interest to this time. But I think these large, expensive IT projects are the one thing that, at least from appropriations, is the biggest need for that I'd like to see a focus on, and not on some of the other things that like the House Energy Technology Committee is doing, like anything to do with regulation of telecom, those any kind of regulation issue, or even some of the policy issues. There's definitely some critical policy issues around data privacy. But from my perspective, I wouldn't think that is something that we would want this committee to take on. Just really doing that oversight when we're out of session, in addition to what the committees are doing, and then having that joint aspect of Senate and House working together is a critical piece of it that's different than the committees just meeting separately in summer, which they could do. But having come together, say, and having it's to me, it's strange that you wouldn't have the committee, the Energy Committee chairs and members on this committee together with some members of appropriations. You could have others, but I think that would be the core part of it. Jitoc committee.
Great. Anything else? And Rep. Treviglia.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, we've spent a lot of time on telecom in this committee, which is duplicative in a lot of ways to the policy committees, both in the House and the Senate. But there's not a lot of work happening in IT in the policy committees. And so really focusing on that. That also, if you look at Jitoc's charge, which I think we went over at the first meeting, maybe we're going to go over it today. It's very broad.
We did go over it, and I can also send just the language of the charge. I think Rick prepared a PowerPoint that kind of hit the high points, so we can give you, it is a broad chart. We can review it again.
I suspect we will be on the future agenda, but this is sort of the first conversation.
That may be something this committee wants to consider, is making a recommendation to the House and Senate to narrow and focus the this committee, which would be a great outcome from your time all today.
Great. And we're not quite at 10:30, but I really appreciate this entire conversation. I appreciate Rep. James, Senator Harrison, Senator Pershlik, Rep. Harrison. Thank you all for this conversation. It was very informative and I think important for all of us. And now we can adjourn the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.